Hello everybody, I'm going to be showing you a story I made of Megatron and the Autobots. The Autobots stood around the main console of Outpost Omega 1, staring at a recovered Decepticon datapad in absolute silence. The discovery. Bulkhead had found the device during the Energon Scout mission. Smokescreen had cracked the encryption, expecting military coordinates. Instead, the screen displayed a high-definition video file recorded inside Megatron's private quarters on the Nemesis. What was on the datapad? The video showed a spacious, dimly lit booth room. Megatron was leaning back against the booth, completely unbothered, calmly reading a report on his own handheld datapad. Starscream was sitting right beside him, completely stripped of his outer wings, dress, and torso, leaving his delicate protoform completely exposed. Soundwave was leaned over Starscream, his black visor inches away, deeply locked in an intense, passionate kiss with the Seeker. The sound, a low rhythmic mechanical vibration, sounded echoed from the datapad speakers. The Autobots' reactions. By the Allspark, Optimus whispered, his optics wide. He stared at the screen in complete disbelief, his local processors briefly glitching. He looked like he needed to purge his tanks. What is that horrific noise? Ratchet rubbed his temples, dialing down his audio receptors. Is the Nemesis engine failing? Is it a Decepticon weapon? No, wait. Ozzy squinted at the screen, her jaw dropping. That noise it's coming from Starscream. Is he vibrating? He's purring, Smokescreen spluttered out, pointing at the screen. Seekers can purr? Since when do Seekers purr? I didn't know they did that, Bumblebee beeped frantically, his wings dropping in sheer awkwardness. He quickly looked away from the screen, covering his optics. So, Bulkhead scratched his thumb, looking incredibly uncomfortable. Megatron just lets them do that right next to him while he checks his emails. Is that a tactical meeting? Turn it off, Optimus commanded softly, his voice cracking slightly with a weariness that million years before had never managed to inflict. Ratchet wiped the drive immediately. With pleasure, Ratchet slammed his silver hand on the console, deleting the file forever. The next day, Unicorn and Primus had forced the Autobots and Decepticon to hang out. The Decepticons still have no idea Megatron, Soundwave, and Starscream are in a threesome. Megatron has no idea the Autobots know. Before scattering, Unicorn and Primus had briefly put aside their cosmic feud for one shared goal, forcing their creations to get along through a surge of divine, unstoppable energy. Both factions had found themselves trapped in a massive, natural Energon lounge, completely unable to draw their weapons. The tension in the room. The Autobots sat on one side of the room, looking visibly traumatized from yesterday's datapad discovery. Across the room, the Decepticons stood in their usually rigid, aggressive formations. Megatron stood proudly at the center, completely unaware that his private life had been thoroughly reviewed by his enemies. Starscream stood a step behind him, smoking and dusting his polished armor plating. Sanders stood perfectly still on Megatron's other side, his visor dark and silent. The awkward exchange. Knockout was the first to break the ice, starting forward to admire his own reflection in a polished pillow. Well, if we are forced to mingle, we might as well enjoy the ambience. What is wrong with you, Autobots? You look like you've all seen a ghost. Smokescreen choked on his cube of Energon. Coughing violently, Bumble let out a series of high-pitched, panicked wails and quickly hid behind Bulkhead. Nothing is wrong, Decepticon, Arcee said, her voice dripping with artificial politeness, as her eyes darted from Megatron to Starscream and finally to Soundwave. We are just processing new intelligence we gathered recently. Megatron narrowed his optics, stepping forward. If you think your pathetic scouting robots will grant you an advantage from, you are sorely mistaken. Optimus looked directly at Megatron. The Autobot leader looked profoundly exhausted. His usually booming, heroic voice was reduced to a flat, deadpan murmur. Megatron, we do not want your reports. We want absolutely nothing to do with your personal businesses. Starscream's mistake. Starscream sneered, stepping beside Megatron. Ha! Typical Autobot cowardice. You shake it in your pedestals, still gazing upon the supreme might of the Decepticons' command structure. At the word command structure, Booker let out a loud snort and laugh that he tried to cover up with a cough. Megatron frowned, looking down at Starscream, then back at the Autobots. He noticed Ratchet was staring at Starscream with intense medical curiosity. Why are you looking at my second in command like that? He is a specimen medic. Megatron demanded, raising his voice an eyebrow. I am simply wondering what Ratchet said, his voice optics twitching as he clutched his wrench tightly. If the air commander requires a tune-up, perhaps a diagnosis on his vocal processors to ensure they don't vibrate at an unsteady frequency. Starscream froze, his wings flapped in strange shock. Soundwave riders slowly tilted toward Ratchet. Megatron's confusion. His vocal processors are perfectly functional, Megatron growled, completely missing the subtext through his screeching, though his screeching is often intolerable. Right, screeching, that's the noise he makes. Starscream under his breath, underneath a sharp nudge from RC. Megatron felt a strange, unsettling shift in the room. Knockout, breakdown, and shockwave were looking back and forth between the two fractions, entirely clueless, but the Autobots were looking at Megatron and Starscream and signs with a mixture of profound pity, horror, and barely suppressed amusement. Soundwave, Megatron commanded quietly. Scan Autobots' recent data logs. They're hiding something. Soundwave didn't move. He almost stood there, but a very brief, static-laced audio popped, emitted from his chest plate. To the rest of the Decepticons, it meant nothing, but to the Autobots, who knew exactly what went on behind closed doors, it looked like a very tense domestic moment. Don't worry, Soundwave, Elsie called with a smirk. Your secret data is perfectly safe. We deleted the file. Then Ratchet then says, So Starscream, how does secret porn work? Soundwave makes multiple cough sounds to hide his laugh. Ratchet's question dropped into a room like a thermal detonator. The outburst. So Starscream? Ratchet asked, crossing his arms and leaning forward with a completely straight face. How exactly does the secret porn work? Is it an involuntary erection in your fuel pump, or do you have to be highly motivated to activate it? Starscream's objects practically bulged out of his face. His wings looked straight up in absolute sheer panic, snapping so hard they made a loud clicking sound. He opened his intake to screech a denial, but no sound came out. Right beside him, fired the sonic flicker with a static line. A split second later, he sees the harsh mechanical coughing sounds erupted from Soundwave's chest. Cough, hack, cough, good. Then time on the stare at the spy master. Soundwave never coughed. He never made unprompted noises at all. Soundwave, Nugget asked, blinking in confusion. Do you have a virus in your ventilation system? Soundwave quickly chopped the audio feed, returning to a rigid, stone-cold silence. The advisor slowly tilted away from Megatron. He was entirely using record Autobot coughs to mask a weird, genuine laugh. Megatron's suspicion. Megatron looked back and forth between his second-in-command, who looked like he was about to faint, and his spy master was acting deeply suspicious. Parent, Megatron grumbled, his heavy eyes his every brow ridge knitting together. Starscream does not purr. He whines, he begs, he plots treason. He does not purr. He turns his massive frame toward Optimus Prime. What is the meaning of this nonsense? What have you scouts been watching? Optimus closes his optics, looking like he wants Prime to open the ground and swallow him whole. Megatron, I implore you, for the sake of whatever dignity we have left, as a Cybertronian race, do not ask. The Decepticons tried to guess. Wait a minute, Brickden whispered to Knockout, watching Starscream tremble. Do you think the others in the glitch in Starscream's coding? Is that why he looks so terrified? Whatever it is, it must be highly embarrassing, Knockout whispered back, smirking as he buffed his arm. Look at him. His paint job is likely turning gray from stress. Starscream found his voice. His spark came in distress. It is a myth, a disgusting fabricated autobot lie. Seekers do not possess such primal domestic audio functions, Lord Megatron. They are trying to physiological warfare us. We must leave immediately. We cannot leave, Starscream. Megatron hissed, his red optics narrowed as he glared at the terrified Seeker. The gods have sealed the doors, and you desperate fanatics tell me that the Autobots know something about you that I do not. Megatron looked over at Starscream. Soundwave, if you share a wing of the ship with him, have you ever heard this variation? Soundwave stood perfectly still. He played a brief audio clip of a complete fat lecture tom, then a clip of door shutting. He was actively lying to his will to protect their collective reputation. See, Starscream shrieked, pointing at Soundwave. Nothing. Soundwave confirms it. Absolute nonsense. On the Autobot side, Smoky and Bucket were completely losing it, biting their hands to keep from laughing out loud at Megatron's total cluelessness. Ratchet then asks, Ratchet curiosity had officially crossed into pure unnaturally trolling. He adjusted his optics, looking entirely clinical as he delivered his next Thursday line. For some more, Starscream, Ratchet continued, tapping his data pad thoughtfully. According to injury biology tests from Voss, I heard that seekers lay eggs. Is this an annual cycle, or does it require a specific structural environment to trigger the reaction? Starscream's entire system failed. A hybrid seeker with wheeze slipped out of his intake. His wing flopped so hard they literally shook. Right on cue, Sanders completely lost control. Snort, cough, hacker. A massive loud snort passes to Sanders' chest, immediately followed by a static string of aggressive, overlapping coughs. He actually had to take a half step back. His shoulders trembling raw death, trying to mask a full-blown laugh and fit behind a wall of pre-recorded static and hacking noises. Pure chaos. Sundays, Megatron spinning around to face the spy master. What in the name of the pit is wrong with you, vocal processor today? Are you choking on a cyber tick? Sanders quickly brought up a holographic warning sign on his visor that was system error, ventilation purge required, desperately trying to play off his absolute amusement at a mechanical failure. Eggs, begged Daniel from the back of the room, his jaw dropping. Hold on, Knockout. Did you know about this? Do seekers lay eggs? Of course not, you brute. Knockout hissed back, though his optics were darting frankly to Starscream midsection. Though it would explain why his boost rooms always smells like freshly polished metal and nested materials. It's biologically impossible, Starscream shrieked, his voice hitting that octave so high it cracked the glass on a nearby engine cube. I am a war machine, a supreme aerial commander. I do not lay. I have never, Lord Megatron, they are defaming me. Megatron's realization. Megatron didn't answer. He slowly turned his massive head, looking for a hysterical, trembling Starscream, to a vibrating scientist who was still letting out tiny, muffled snorts, and finally to the Autobots. The Autobots were a complete mess. Rocket was face down on a table, pounding his fist against the metal in the silent, agonizing laughter Smokescreen was practically crying, holding his stomach. Elsie had her hand over her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Optimus simply pinched a bit of his nose, staring at the floor, wishing he could dissolve into raw energon. Megatron's red optics narrowed into slits. He looked closely at Soundwave, then back to Starscream. The pieces were starting to drift dangerously close together in his tactile mind. Soundwave, Megatron said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. Why are you laughing? Soundwave finally breaks and accidentally projects a snippet of the rear on his face visor. Soundwave's internal processor completely overheated from the sheer pressure of pulling back his laughter. His filer crumbled, the visor glitch. As Megatron towered over him, demanding answers, Soundwave's visor suddenly short-circuited. Power system error when it shattered in his place. The screen lit up with a high-definition video playback. It was a perfect 3-second loop snippet from the digital D-pad. On Soundwave's face, the entire room saw a stripped-down Starscream pointed intensely against Megatron's side. Starscream himself, personally locking face plates with the Seeker. Megatron sitting right next to him, completely unbothered, casually scored on the datapad. The video clip broke, then it looped again. The audio file attached to it blasted through Soundwave speakers at max volume. The room filled with a distinct, deep, rhythmic purring of a Seeker. Total Decepticon meltdown. The room went dead silent. The only sound was Starscream's recorded purr echoing off the walls. What? Victor's optical senses practically popped out of his helm. What am I looking at right now? Knocker's jaw dropped so low it hit his chest armor. He slowly looked from the screen to Megatron to Starscream and back to the screen. Well, I suppose that is just a question about the structural environment. Silence! Starscream screamed, his face rates turning a bright, overheated engine red. He lunged forward and threw his hands over Soundwave's visor, trying to block the screen. It's a deep fake. A holographic illusion crafted by autobots for secrecy. Megatron computes. Megatron stared at the spiral of the face. He watched the reel on loop for a fourth time before Starscream covered it. The world froze. The giant red optics blinked once, twice. He looked down at his own hands and then looked at the datapad he was currently holding in real life. It was the exact same posture. The resonant making like a forge of Solus Prime Strike. You. Megatron's voice was low, terrifying vision that rattled the floorboards. He slowly turned his gaze to Starscream, who was still desperately trying to smooth Soundwave's face. The Autobots did not steal Texas data, they stole that. The Autobots escape. Prime didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He simply looked at his hand and gave a silver two-finger and gesture. Abort mission. Without making a sound, the Autobots again slowly back and away toward the exit doors. Bulklet was back and away toward the exit doors. Bulklet was still vibrating with silent laughter, tears of coolant pooling in his eyes. Smokescreen covered his mouth with both hands, shuffling backward as fast as his headstocks can carry him. My lord, I can explain, Soundwave whimpered, dropping his hands from Soundwave's visor as Soundwave finally managed to force the screen to go black. It was a team-building exercise, a morale boost for the command structure. Megatron slowly raised his arm, his whizzing cannon jerked into a dangerous, high-pitched whine. Starscream, Soundwave, into the corridor, now. Unicorn Primes are currently dying laughing. The divine barrier sealing the lounge suddenly began to vibrate. Deep, booming cosmic rumbles shook the entire structure. Knocking bricked in and knocked out off the peds. The guards awakened. It was an earthquake. It wasn't an earthquake, it was the sound of literal guards on Cybertron losing their minds. High above the ceiling, two massive celestial masses of light and the shadow appeared. Primus, the creator of the Autobots, and Unicorn, the Chaos Bringer, who floated by side. For the first time in billions of years, they weren't fighting. They were dying laughing. The cosmic roast. Primus was lost in a brilliant golden light, his divine laughter attuning like 1,000 rolling thunderstorms. I created a secret race to fly, to conquer the skies, not to hatch eggs on Megatron's booth. He boomed across the sphere of pure energy and ripened across his cosmic form. Nucleon's dark planetary mass was literally shaken. Dark matter sparked around his horns as he let out a deep, planet-cracking wheeze. And I thought my dark energy was the most chaotic thing in this universe, Megatron. Is this how you spend your downtime while planning to conquer Earth? The ultimate humiliation. Megatron stood frozen. His fusion camera was still charged, but he slowly lowered it. His giant red eyes looked circled by the sky in complete horrified disbelief. He could handle fighting Optimus Prime. He could handle a Decepticon mutiny. He could not handle being roasted by God and Satan at the same time. My lord, Megatron whispered, his absolute dignity completely shattered in the stardust. Starscream had completed collapsed onto his knees, spray on his face and his hands, his wings twitching uncontrollably as Prime's laughter vibrated right through his metal tresses. Thunder simply turned around, walked directly into the nearest corner of the room, and stood facing around in absolute silent shame. Well, Starscream whispered from the back, wiping a tear from his eye as he watched the two supreme creators of the universe point and laugh at the Decepticon High Command. At least we brought peace to the cosmos. The end. Okay, everybody, I'm going to apologize for the stutters and mispronunciations. So, bye everyone. Hope you liked it.